I remember the morning it all started, not the affair, but the unraveling, because of the damn toast. It was Tuesday. I woke up to the smell of something burnt, something dry and bitter floating through the house. I shuffled out of bed in my boxers, rubbing sleep out of my eyes, and found my wife, Alyssa, in the kitchen, scraping blackened crumbs into the sink. She wasn't even looking at me when I walked in. Just standing there, in her pressed white blouse and tight gray skirt, focused on the toaster like it was going to confess something. "You all right?" I asked, scratching the back of my neck. She jumped like she didn't hear me come in. "Yeah. Just burned the toast again. Stupid thing." I glanced at the clock. 6:53 a.m. "You got a big meeting or something?" I asked, eyeing the effort she'd put into her hair and makeup. Alyssa worked in marketing, downtown at one of those glassy corporate towers. She usually threw her hair in a ponytail and left with a granola bar. Today, she looked like she was stepping into a photo shoot. "Presentation," she said quickly. "New product launch. It's important. My manager's going to be there." I nodded and poured myself some coffee. I didn't say it then, but something in her voice stuck with me. It was too quick, too crisp. Like she'd rehearsed the answer. But I brushed it off. She kissed me on the cheek, barely, and left 10 minutes later. Her heels clicked down the hallway like gunshots. I stood at the sink, sipping coffee, staring out the window, and that damn smell of burnt toast hung in the air like a warning I couldn't read yet. The day Alyssa got promoted started with her waking up before me, which didn't happen often. She was already dressed when I stumbled into the kitchen in my robe, hair flat on one side and standing straight up on the other. She was in front of the mirror in the hallway, twisting her hair up into a tight bun. There was something about the way she moved that morning, efficient, no nonsense, focused. She wasn't humming or sipping coffee like she usually did. She didn't ask me how I slept. Her eyes didn't meet mine when I mumbled a groggy good morning. She just nodded, as if her brain was miles away from our apartment. I made coffee, cracked some eggs, and stood at the stove, watching her walk back and forth, picking up papers and a folder. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't anything she said or did. It was what she didn't say or didn't do, no kiss goodbye, no asking me to wish her luck, no grabbing the lunch I usually packed for her. "Big day?" I asked as she grabbed her purse. "Huge," she said, pausing by the door, almost smiling. "If this goes well, Derek might move me up." Derek. Her manager. I'd heard his name a few times. She said he was tough but respected her ideas. She talked about him like you'd talk about a coach or a professor you wanted to impress. Never like someone she was attracted to. Never in a way that raised red flags. But hearing his name that morning, paired with the strange energy she was radiating, put a tiny crack in something inside me. "You'll crush it," I said, forcing a smile. She didn't hug me. She didn't even say thank you. She just nodded again and left. The eggs burned while I stood there staring at the door. That night, I cleaned the apartment. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it was something deeper, some unconscious instinct that knew things were about to change. I vacuumed. I did laundry. I wiped down the counters and took out the trash. Then I sat on the couch, watching the clock. Alyssa didn't come home at 6. Didn't come home at 7. At 8:13, she texted. "Running late. Went to dinner with team. Celebrating. Be back soon." That was the first time I felt something sharp in my gut. A sliver of suspicion. I stared at the message, trying to read between the lines. Celebrating made sense if she got the promotion. But something felt off. When she finally walked through the door at 9:26 p.m., she was glowing. Not smiling. Glowing. That was the only word I could think of. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes sparkled, and her blouse was untucked in that casual, careless way that doesn't happen by accident. I stood up from the couch, and she froze like a deer in headlights. "Hey," she said. "Didn't think you'd wait up." "I was curious how the presentation went," I said. Her smile widened. "It went amazing. Derek said it was the best pitch he'd seen in years. He told the team I'd be moving up to senior strategist. It's not official until next month, but he already gave me a raise." I walked over and hugged her. She didn't hug me back right away. When she finally did, it was brief. Awkward. "Congrats," I whispered. "Thanks." She slipped out of my arms and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the shower start 5 minutes later. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She came to bed an hour after me, smelling of lavender soap and something else I couldn't place. Something expensive. Something unfamiliar. She didn't touch me. Just curled up and fell asleep. Over the next 2 weeks, Alyssa was busy. Meetings, projects, new responsibilities. She stopped coming home for dinner. Sometimes she didn't eat at all. Other times, she brought home leftover takeout and stored it in the fridge with a label that said, D. One night, I asked her, "You eating with Derek a lot?" She flinched, barely perceptibly. "The team eats together." "Just wondering," I said. "You talk about him more than you talk about me." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic." It wasn't dramatic. It was observation. She used to talk about us, our weekend plans, trips we wanted to take, dumb movies we liked. Now all her stories started with, "Derek said," or "Derek thinks," or "Derek told me." She was proud of his approval. Addicted to it, even. And I couldn't help but notice how she dressed better now. How she wore lipstick even on Fridays. How she bought new perfume without telling me. The dots weren't connected yet, but they were getting closer. The first time I saw them together, it wasn't planned. I stopped by her office to surprise her. I brought lunch from her favorite sandwich place. Nothing fancy. Just turkey, pickles, and extra mustard, the way she liked it. When I got there, the receptionist told me she was in a meeting. I waited. 20 minutes later, she walked out of a glass conference room with Derek. They were laughing. His hand was on her back. Not lower back. Not touching her ass or anything. But still. It lingered. She froze when she saw me. "Hey," I said, lifting the brown paper bag. "Brought lunch." "Oh," she said. Her smile was tight. "That's sweet." Derek stepped forward, offering a hand. "You must be the husband. I've heard a lot about you." His grip was firm. Eyes cool. Smug. Like he already knew something I didn't. "Likewise," I said, holding his gaze longer than polite. We ate in the break room. Alyssa barely touched her sandwich. Said she had to get back to work. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel too tightly. I didn't want to believe it then. But part of me already knew. I stopped keeping track of the nights Alyssa came home late. Somewhere between the second week of her promotion and the third, I just stopped asking. The answers were always the same: team dinner, long meeting, late project. But it was her smile that changed. It wasn't there when she walked through the door anymore. Not for me. Not like it used to be. The woman who used to rush home to show me a funny meme, or tell me about her annoying co-workers, now entered our apartment like she was entering a hotel room. Temporary. Quiet. Cold. One night, she came in around 11:30, hair down, heels in her hand, and reeking of whiskey and perfume. I sat in the dark, watching TV on mute. She jumped when she saw me. "Jesus, you scared me," she said, flipping on the light. You weren't answering your phone. It died. I told you my charger stopped working. So buy a new one. She blinked at me, like she didn't recognize who I was. Why are you acting like this? Like what? Like you're my parole officer. I didn't respond. I just stared at her. Her blouse was rumpled. There was a faint smudge on her neck. Lipstick? No. Maybe a bruise. I couldn't tell. She stared back, then finally mumbled, "I'm tired," and disappeared into the bathroom. I sat there until the water stopped running. Then I turned off the TV and went to bed alone. 3 days later, I found the test. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for aspirin in the bathroom cabinet. I had a migraine that felt like a balloon expanding inside my skull. I opened the mirror, and there it was, a white plastic stick, hidden behind the shaving cream. Positive. For a long time, I just stood there, holding it like it might change if I looked long enough. I didn't say anything that night. Or the next. I watched her, listened to her, waited. On Friday morning, she finally told me. "I have something to tell you," she said over cereal. "Okay." She stared into her bowl like it held the answer. "I'm pregnant." I forced myself to look surprised. "Wow. That's okay. That's a lot." She smiled weakly, but I could see the tension in her jaw. Her fingers trembled slightly against her spoon. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Are you?" "I think so. I mean, it wasn't planned, but maybe this is fate." "Right. Fate." She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her skin was cold. Her eyes were wide. "We can do this, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Sure. We can do this." And in that moment, I knew I needed proof. I started watching her. Closely. She kept a second phone in her purse. I saw it one night when she left her bag on the couch. It buzzed, just once, and the screen lit up with a name, Derek. No last name. No emojis. Just that name. I knew what I had to do. A friend of mine from high school, Benny, worked in private security. We hadn't talked in years, but when I called him and explained that I needed someone followed, he didn't ask too many questions. He gave me a discount. Said it felt like high school again. Within 2 days, I had photos. Alyssa. Derek. A hotel. Same one, 3 nights in a row. Different outfits. Same room. In one photo, she was laughing as he opened the car door for her. In another, his hand was on her lower back. In the last one, they kissed. No more guessing. I spent the next night in my truck, parked outside that same hotel. I watched her walk in. I watched her come out 2 hours later. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, feeling like the world had flipped upside down. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed him. Derek lived in a fancy condo downtown. His building had a doorman and private elevator access. But I didn't care. I waited outside until he walked his dog, a little white thing with a blue collar. He didn't recognize me. Or maybe he did and didn't care. "Hey," I said, stepping into his path. He looked up, surprised. Do I know you?" "You do now." "Look, man, if this is about Alyssa." "It is." He sighed. "Okay. Look, I didn't know she was married at first. When I found out, she told me you guys were separated. We weren't. I know that now. And listen, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on your marriage. That's not who I am." I laughed bitterly. "It is exactly who you are." His face darkened. You want to hit me or something? Get it out of your system? No. I want you to tell me if the baby is yours. That shut him up. What? You heard me. He looked away, jaw tightening. She said she didn't know. Do you believe her? He didn't answer. A week later, Alyssa scheduled her first ultrasound. I offered to go with her. She looked like she wanted to say no, but didn't. The technician smiled politely, asked us both to hold our questions, and began the exam. The screen flickered with gray and white shapes. There we go, she said. Heartbeat strong. I smiled. So did Alyssa. But our smiles weren't for each other. How far along? I asked. About 10 weeks. I did the math. Counted backward. 10 weeks ago, she was still sleeping beside me every night. But she was also working late. 10 weeks ago, she was climbing the ladder. I looked at Alyssa. Her hands were folded across her chest, eyes fixed on the monitor. She wasn't crying. She wasn't smiling. She was staring. And I knew. She didn't know whose baby it was. And she was terrified. It wasn't long before Derek stopped returning her calls. She came home one night, red-eyed, mascara-streaked, and dropped her purse on the floor. He ghosted me, she said. I sat on the couch, flipping channels. Who? Don't. Just don't. What did you expect? He was never going to leave his life for you. He said he would. Yeah. And what did you say about me? She didn't answer. You lied to both of us. And now you're pregnant, and you don't even know whose it is. I made a mistake. No. You made a series of decisions. And now, here we are. She sank to the floor, sobbing. I watched her. Detached. Cold. Because I wasn't done. This was only the beginning. You know, it's strange how pain settles in. It doesn't always come like an explosion. Sometimes it's like dust. You don't notice it until you look around and realize everything's covered in it. That's how life felt after the ultrasound. Alyssa walked around like a ghost. I still slept beside her, still brought her toast in the mornings, still listened when she cried. But the part of me that loved her, the part that trusted her, had withered. Dried up. Gone. I pretended. I kept up the act. Because I needed time. And because I wasn't done yet. Derek had vanished. From Alyssa's phone, her office, even her company. One day she came home from her doctor's appointment, set down her bag slowly, and said, he resigned. I raised an eyebrow. Just like that? HR said it was personal. No warning. No forwarding contact. Just gone. I let the silence grow between us. Do you think it was because of me? She asked. You really think he was that committed to you? She didn't answer. I saw the realization click in her eyes. Derek hadn't just ghosted her. He had run. Benny, the guy who got me the surveillance photos, came through again. After slipping a few bills to someone in building maintenance, he found out where Derek had gone. He left the company and moved into a secluded cabin about 90 minutes out, deep in the woods past Fairview. It was a strange move for a corporate guy with Italian leather shoes and a Tesla. So I drove out there. I didn't go to fight him. I didn't even plan to talk. I just wanted to see the kind of man who would blow up lives like matches and walk away without blinking. His place sat behind a rusted gate, wrapped in trees, with a wooden porch that had seen better years. No car in sight. Just silence. I sat in my truck with the windows down, listening to the chirp of cicadas, watching for movement. I don't know what I expected, maybe for him to come out with a rifle. Or for some other woman to step out behind him. But after 20 minutes, the door creaked open. And there he was. He looked broken. His beard was thick and wild. His face gaunt. He wore sweats and a t-shirt stained with what looked like soup. He didn't look like a seducer or a predator. He looked like a man who'd been hit by a freight train and never got back up. He stepped onto the porch, turned slowly, and sat down on an old chair with a squeaky hinge. I don't know what made me do it. But I got out of the truck. "You look like hell," I said, approaching. He glanced at me. Squinted. "You again. You remember. Hard to forget someone when you've slept with their wife." I didn't flinch. "What are you doing out here? Hiding?" He shrugged. "Trying not to breathe poison anymore." "Is that what she was? Poison? They all are." I narrowed my eyes. "Excuse me?" He shook his head, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. "Sorry. Not her. Not exactly. Just, the situation. The habit." "What habit?" He took a deep breath, leaned back, and stared at the canopy of trees overhead. "My wife and I lost our kids 3 years ago. Car crash. Drunk driver hit the wrong lane. All 3 gone. Just like that. I'm sorry." She blamed me. I blamed God. I started drinking. She left. I stayed. Got promoted. Threw myself into work. And somewhere along the way, sleeping with married women, felt like control. I stayed silent. "It wasn't about sex," he said. "Not really. It was about stealing something that didn't belong to me. Because life stole everything from me." "That's not an excuse." "I know. So you ruined families to soothe your own grief?" "I did. And I'll live with that till I die." His voice cracked. The wind rustled the trees behind him. When Alyssa told me she was pregnant, I thought maybe this was a sign. A new start. But then I realized it might not be mine. And even if it was, what kind of father would I be? I left. I had to. "So that's it? You just quit?" He looked at me. "Would you have wanted me to stay?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. I left him there. No punches. No shouting. Just quiet. The drive back was long. But it gave me time to think. I thought about how trauma twists people. How grief turns them selfish. I thought about Alyssa. About how far she had gone for a promotion. About the way she looked when she thought she was finally being seen. And I realized, she had betrayed me not just because she wanted to climb higher, but because someone made her feel powerful in a world where she'd always felt small. But that didn't excuse her. Or him. They both made their choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. Alyssa was making dinner when I came home. Pasta and garlic bread. The kitchen smelled like comfort food, but it didn't fool me. "Hey," she said softly. "Where were you?" "Nowhere. Just driving." She nodded. We ate in silence. She pushed food around her plate. I watched her. "I want a paternity test," I said after a while. Her fork stopped. "Now?" "As soon as possible. I need to know." She swallowed. "Okay. And if it's not mine, I need you to leave." Her lips parted like she might argue. But then she closed them. She nodded. And that night, I slept in the guest room. Alone. And for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. It had been 10 days since Derek's body was cremated. The urn sat on a high shelf in the garage, flanked by old paint cans and motor oil. I couldn't bring myself to place it anywhere meaningful. It didn't feel right. Nothing about his end felt right. The official word was that Derek had been under the influence and swerved into the median. But the unofficial whispers painted a darker picture, of a man riddled with guilt, crushed beneath the weight of choices he couldn't undo. And I kept circling the truth like a buzzard, waiting to pick its bones. Alyssa hadn't called. Not since the funeral. Not since the reading of Derek's will, which was when I found out something that nearly shattered me again. He left me his tools. All of them. Every last wrench, chisel, and saw. You were the only one who saw the real me, the letter said. Use them to build something that matters. It was handwritten, uneven, with the occasional blot of ink where the pen had stalled. I held that letter for an hour, tracing the grooves of the paper, rereading the words until they lost meaning. I thought about burning it. Then I thought about framing it. In the end, I folded it and placed it in the drawer where I kept Alyssa's wedding ring. I took a leave from work. Told them I needed time to sort through Derek's effects. That was partially true. What I really needed was space. Space from Alyssa. From the pitying looks. From the cracked reflections of my own failure. So I spent my days in Derek's workshop. It was tucked behind his rental home, a low cedar-paneled building with a rusted tin roof and a sticky door that whined whenever I opened it. Inside, it smelled like pine dust, old metal, and forgotten dreams. I found a half-finished cradle in the corner. It was beautiful. Curved oak, dovetail joints, hand-carved stars on each side. The kind of piece someone pours their soul into. I ran my fingers along the smooth grain. It felt like a confession. Was it meant for one of the children he lost? Or had he started it after the deaths, trying to make sense of the emptiness? I didn't know. But I couldn't leave it unfinished. So I picked up his tools. And I started to build. Each day, I sanded. Cut. Shaped. Assembled. It wasn't about the cradle anymore. It was about movement. About proving to myself I could create something instead of just surviving destruction. Then, one day, I found the envelope. It was taped to the underside of Derek's workbench. My name was written in block letters. Inside was a photograph of Alyssa. She was sitting in Derek's office chair, laughing, a coffee cup in her hand, legs crossed. She looked relaxed. Comfortable. Like she belonged there. Behind her, on the corkboard, was a pinned sonogram. The date on it was 2 weeks before the accident. I felt the ground shift under me. I had believed her when she said the baby was Derek's. But this? This was proof that he believed it, too. That he cherished it. That he might have even been ready to start over. And then he was gone. I placed the photo beside the cradle. It felt like they belonged together, one a symbol of hope, the other of regret. That night, I called Alyssa. She didn't answer. But I left a message. I'm finishing the cradle, I said. I think you should see it when it's done. I think, we both need that. I didn't know if she'd come. But something told me the story wasn't finished. Not yet. It was the sound of nails giving way that changed everything. I was pulling apart an old shelving unit in the back of Derek's workshop, trying to make space for the cradle once it was finished. The wood creaked in protest, old screws stripped with time and wear. As I heaved a plank off the wall, it pulled loose a thin panel of cedar behind it, and revealed a narrow cavity between the studs. Something was tucked in there. It was a small tin box. The kind used for tobacco or maybe candy in another lifetime. I brushed off the dust and pried it open. Inside, folded and yellowed with time, was a stack of letters. At the top, one addressed to me. Postmarked 5 months ago. My heart hammered as I opened it. Derek's handwriting again. By the time you read this, it began, I'll either be dead or too far gone to explain. But you deserve the truth. I sat down. The tools, the cradle, the ache in my bones, none of it prepared me for what I read next. I never wanted to hurt you, the letter continued. Alyssa came to me, not the other way around. I said no. At first. But I was weak. So damn weak. She told me things, how lost you'd become, how much you resented her for the miscarriage. How you barely touched her anymore. I didn't know what to believe, but I believed her. I always had a thing for broken people. I paused, my fingers trembling. I thought I'd already felt every kind of betrayal, but this was like discovering a new shade of grief. I was wrong, Derek wrote. She was lying. About a lot of it. I found out too late. She was using me. For leverage, for the promotion, for a thrill, maybe all of it. But when she told me she was pregnant, I wanted to believe it was real. There were tear stains on the page. She said it wasn't mine after all. That she'd never leave you. That it was a game to her. I told her I'd go public. She laughed. Said no one would believe a man like me. That's when I lost it. He described their last conversation. The threats. The desperation. The night he drove off the road. But he insisted, again and again, it wasn't an accident. I made sure I didn't hurt anyone else. I just couldn't live with it. But I didn't want you left with lies. The letter ended with a plea. Don't let her rewrite the story. You're better than both of us. I sat there, the letter in my lap, my breath caught somewhere between fury and nausea. The baby wasn't Derek's. But it wasn't mine either. The air in the workshop felt too thick. I grabbed my phone and called Alyssa. This time, she answered. Hey, she said. Her voice was tight. Guarded. I was wondering if you'd call again. I found Derek's letter. There was silence. Then a long, slow exhale. So now you know, she said. I know a lot more than you thought I would. She didn't respond right away. Finally, she said, what do you want from me? I want to meet. Tomorrow. Derek's workshop. Noon. You're not going to hurt me, are you? She asked, half joking. No, I said. You're going to tell me the truth. When I hung up, I didn't feel peace. I felt something sharper, colder. Resolve. I spent that night finishing the cradle. Each nail was a question. Each stroke of varnish, a memory I wasn't sure I could trust anymore. By morning, it gleamed like something sacred. At noon, Alyssa walked in. Her eyes were rimmed with fatigue, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. She looked older. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. She stared at the cradle. Then at me. I never wanted him to die, she said. But I didn't love him. Not really. But you used him. She didn't deny it. I thought I could control it. I thought I was taking back power. After everything that happened between us, I was angry. I wanted to feel wanted again. And the baby? She looked down. It's not his, she said quietly. And it's not yours. That hit like a hammer. Then whose is it? She hesitated. Some guy from a work trip. It didn't matter. I didn't even remember his last name. I just didn't care anymore. I walked past her and opened a cabinet. Pulled out Derek's tools. Placed them one by one on the workbench. Then why come here? I asked. She looked confused. Why did you come today? I thought maybe you'd want to start over. I picked up the photo of her in Derek's chair. The one with the sonogram behind her. I handed it to her. I did start over, I said. Just not with you. She looked at the picture. Her expression cracked for just a second. "You can keep the cradle," I told her. "For your baby. Whoever he is." And I walked out of the workshop without looking back. The sun was warm. The road ahead empty. I didn't need revenge. I needed a future. And for the first time in a long time, I could see one. I didn't look back. Not once. Not as the door to Derek's workshop closed behind me, not as Alyssa's silhouette stood frozen in the dusty light that poured in from the cracked window. I walked until my legs ached, and still I kept walking. It wasn't about the destination anymore, it was about distance. Putting space between myself and the twisted wreckage of everything I used to believe in. That night, I stayed at a motel off the old highway. It smelled like bleach and stale cigarettes, but the bed was clean and the silence didn't accuse me of anything. I stared at the ceiling, Derek's letter on the nightstand, the photo still clenched in my hand. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I dreamed of fire. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Alyssa had never asked me for a divorce, but I knew it was the only sane path forward. I'd buried too much of myself in that marriage already. What remained needed soil of its own. The lawyer, a woman named Marla Ortiz, didn't ask unnecessary questions. She said we could file on grounds of infidelity and emotional abandonment. I gave her the details without embellishment. Facts were enough. She was quiet a moment after I finished. "You sound like a man who's been through a war." "I buried my best friend," I said. "I watched my wife become a stranger. And I learned the truth too late to stop any of it." "Well," she said, "then it's time to rebuild." A week passed. Then two. I didn't hear from Alyssa. I didn't expect to. Instead, I found myself drawn back to the workshop. Not to revisit the past, but to finish something. The cradle I'd made, so carefully crafted, with Derek's tools and my own wounded hands, sat untouched. One afternoon, I loaded it into the back of my truck and drove. Not to Alyssa's. To a shelter for women and children in the next county over. A friend from the hardware store had told me about it. Quiet place. Run by a former schoolteacher who believed in second chances. When I dropped off the cradle, the woman, her name was Mrs. Caldwell, asked no questions. Just smiled gently and said, "Some baby will be real lucky to sleep in this." I nodded, blinked harder than I wanted to, and left. And then, the letter arrived. Not from Alyssa. Not from Derek. From a man named Nathaniel Sharp. It was typed, on official-looking letterhead from a private law firm out of Baton Rouge. Apparently, Derek had named me as a beneficiary in his personal will. A cabin. Deep in the Ozarks. Property Derek had purchased under an alias years before, right after his divorce and before the promotion that changed everything. The letter called it, retreat, a refuge. There were conditions, of course. I had to sign a release, visit in person, and acknowledge the terms. I stared at the paper for a long time. I didn't need a cabin. But something about it pulled at me. Maybe because Derek had meant for me to find it. Maybe because I needed to understand more than what he'd confessed. 2 days later, I was driving through winding roads lined with towering oaks and brush so thick it felt like nature was closing in. The GPS gave up 5 miles out, and I followed crude directions scribbled on the back of the legal letter. The cabin appeared through the trees like a ghost. 2 stories, porch sagging, windows like sleepy eyes. But it was solid. Quiet. And waiting. I unlocked the door with a key left in a stone rabbit near the steps. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and old tobacco. A fireplace dominated the far wall. There were books. Hundreds of them. A guitar in the corner. Photos I'd never seen, of Derek, younger, smiling with a woman I didn't recognize. And one of me. From a company retreat years ago. Laughing. caught mid-toast. Derek had kept it. Framed it. What the hell? I found the journal in a drawer near the bed. Derek's handwriting again. Dozens of entries. Some mundane. Some uncomfortably raw. But one stuck out. I loved Alyssa. But I admired him. Is that so wrong? To love one and envy the other? He never saw it. But I did. The way he carried himself. The way he forgave when others would have burned it all down. I wanted to be like that. But I wasn't. I failed him. I failed both of them. If he finds this place, maybe he'll understand. Maybe he'll hate me less. Or maybe that's the point, not forgiveness, but clarity. I read the line 3 times. I didn't know how to feel. It was one thing to be betrayed by a friend. Another to realize that friend may have placed you on a pedestal the whole time. Derek was broken. Like me. Like Alyssa. Like everyone. But he'd tried, in his own way, to make it right. And now, I was sitting in the echo of his repentance. I spent a week in the cabin. Thinking. Writing. Sleeping under a sky that didn't accuse or pity me. When I left, I locked the door behind me and mailed a key to Mrs. Caldwell, with a note. For someone who needs a place to start over. It was time. Time to go home. Not to Alyssa. Not to what I had lost. But to what I could still build. With my own hands. I returned to town like a ghost slipping through an old photograph. No one noticed me, and I didn't care. The only place I wanted to be was the lumberyard. It was mid-morning when I pulled in, the same gravel crunching beneath the tires of my truck. Marcus, the guy who ran the front desk, raised an eyebrow as I walked in. Back from the dead, he asked. Just visiting the ruins, I said, managing a half-smile. He nodded slowly. Your name came up last week. Someone dropped off a box for you. Said it was from a mutual friend. Derek? Marcus shrugged. Didn't say. But it felt personal. He brought out a wooden box, roughly the size of a toolbox, sealed with a rusted latch. I took it without opening it there. I didn't want curious eyes watching whatever ghosts crawled out of that thing. Back at the motel, I placed the box on the table. Took a breath. Opened it. Inside, a leather-bound ledger. Old, worn. The name etched on the inside cover wasn't Derek's. It was Alyssa's. I flipped through it. It wasn't a diary. It wasn't a budget. It was a ledger of debts. Emotional ones. Favors. Secrets. Transactions. At first, I didn't understand. Then it clicked. This was her game. Each page listed names. Dates. Actions. Cross-referenced notes. The level of detail was disturbing. There were entries for Derek. For me. For others I didn't know. And then, there was a final page. Dated just 2 weeks ago. Cabin found. He knows. Time to disappear. No signature. Just a smudged thumbprint. I stared at the words, the weight of it pressing down like a vice. She'd known I would find it. She wanted me to. Why? Then, tucked behind the last page, a photo. Grainy, clearly taken from a distance. It was Emily. Standing in front of her gallery. Laughing. I flipped the photo over. A handwritten note. Be careful who you trust. Some ghosts wear fresh skin. I sat back, heart pounding. The gallery. Emily. Derek's letter. The journal. The cabin. It wasn't just regret. It wasn't just grief. This was a map. Not one leading back to Alyssa. But to something else. Something darker. I pulled out my phone. Called the number Derek had once scrawled on a sticky note in the workshop's backroom, the one labeled, "For when the world ends." It rang 5 times. Then a voice I didn't recognize answered. "Thought you'd never call," it said. The voice on the line was deep, deliberate. Not Derek. But there was something in the way he spoke, like someone who'd read the same terrible script I had and was waiting for the final scene. "You got the ledger," he said. It wasn't a question. I did. "And the picture? Who are you?" "A friend of Derek's. And an enemy of the one you think you've been chasing." "Emily?" Silence. "Then, she's not who you think. Meet me behind the old Carmichael cannery at sundown. Come alone." The line went dead. I stared at my phone. My instinct told me this could be a trap. But everything in my gut told me I didn't have a choice anymore. At sundown, the cannery looked like a crime scene the world forgot. I parked under the rusted sign and waited. 10 minutes passed before a figure stepped out of the shadows. Tall. Pale. Weathered. With a limp. He nodded once. "Name's Hal. I used to work with Derek, until Alyssa turned him." I blinked. "Turned him?" Hal handed me a small USB drive. "Watch what's on this. Then you'll understand." She played all of us. You, Derek, the manager, Hal, even Emily. I went back to the motel, locked the door, plugged in the drive. On screen, grainy footage played, Alyssa in her office, kissing the manager. Then, talking on the phone. He thinks it's his baby. I need that promotion, and Derek's too broken to get in my way. Cut to another scene, Alyssa arguing with Derek. "You owe me, Derek. I saved you from that fire, remember? You keep quiet, or I tell them what you really did in Phoenix." And then a final clip. Alyssa and Emily. Drinking wine. Laughing. Emily, "He's halfway in love with me already." Alyssa, "Good. When it's all done, he'll bury Derek's secret for us." The screen faded to black. My chest tightened. The betrayal wasn't just Alyssa. It wasn't just the manager. It was everyone. Even Emily. Maybe especially Emily. I sat there for an hour. Then I picked up the ledger. The USB. And I went to Emily's gallery. She was hosting some kind of exhibit, bright lights, cheap wine, laughing voices echoing through expensive hallways. She saw me and smiled like none of it ever happened. "Hey. I was wondering when you'd." I handed her the ledger. "And the USB." Her face paled. "You should leave town," I said quietly. "Tonight." She opened her mouth to speak, but I was already walking away. Past paintings of things I didn't understand. Past people who'd never know the truth. And when I got back to my truck, I found another envelope sitting on the seat. No name. Just my handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a sonogram. A sticky note attached. I lied. "It is yours, Alyssa." And scribbled beneath, in red pen. "But that doesn't mean you win." My hands trembled. Because behind the note was a second photo. Dated 2 days ago. It showed Alyssa. Alive. Smiling. Holding a newborn. Standing next to Derek. I blinked. Looked again. But the image didn't change. They were alive. Together. All of it, every clue, every breadcrumb, had led me exactly where they wanted. Because maybe the game hadn't been about revenge. Maybe it was about vanishing. And I had been their perfect decoy.